Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about a turbulent era in American history. A time of tension and a time of rebuilding that happened right after the Civil War. That's right, Reconstruction. How's it going everybody? Welcome to Virtual History 360. I'm Mr. Wade and this is Flipping History. If this is your first time here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell to be notified of new videos that'll help you in your class. Alright, here we go. Like I said in the intro, today we'll be talking about Reconstruction. That's the name of the period that follows the Civil War. Now, of course, we can't talk about Reconstruction without mentioning one of the greatest what-ifs in history. I'm talking about what could have happened if Abraham Lincoln had not been assassinated. I mean, with malice toward none could have meant a brighter future for those former Confederate states, but we'll never know. What we do know is what really happened. And of course, this is one of those topics that will take a lot longer than a short video like this to describe in detail, but I'm going to try my best to sum up the big points for you. So we'll start our story with presidential Reconstruction. This was the plan under Andrew Johnson. It simply said that Southern states had to rewrite their constitutions, elect new governments, and ratify the 13th Amendment. Remember the amendment that abolished slavery, right? This is also when the Freedmen's Bureau was established to provide food and medical care for both blacks and whites in the South. Education was another big push, and thousands flocked to the free schools that were being opened. But on the flip side of this, the new Southern governments were being run by many of the same people who held office before the war. To retaliate against Reconstruction, black codes were passed. These Southern laws were designed to limit the rights of freedmen, force them back to work on old plantations, and ensure that freedmen stayed on the bottom of the social ladder. Without Lincoln to keep the peace, radical Republicans launched their attack against the Southern Johnson. They knew they held power at the national level, and this is what we consider to be Congressional Reconstruction. Congress worked to give freedmen the full rights of citizenship. This is where the 14th Amendment gets passed and ratified, which grants all people born in the United States equal protection under the law. Even with these successes, Congress still had it out for Andrew Johnson. They passed the Tenure of Office Act, and when Johnson fired Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, they impeached him. And as the trial moved to the Senate, they realized that his term was almost up, and he did not stand a chance of re-election. There's also a rumor I like to tell my students. The president pro tempore at the time was a senator from Ohio named Benjamin Wade. He was known for being corrupt and mean-spirited, but he was also next in line for the presidency. So when the vote came down, Johnson was acquitted by just one vote. The saying goes that Johnson was innocent because Wade was guilty. Could I be related? I don't know. I'll have to look into it. Now, that may just be a story, but what we do know is that had he been removed from office, that would have set a precedent that the president cannot oppose Congress, which would have been very bad. Now, while all this was happening, former slave owners were struggling to find people to work their land. Their solution was to rent parts of that land to former slaves. This system rigged it so that sharecroppers had to borrow money, and that would pay for their food, tools, supplies, seeds, everything they would need to survive. And that would stretch them until the harvest, but most of the time they didn't make enough money from the harvest to pay back their debts. And this caused a system of lifetime or perpetual poverty, and we're still dealing with those, the reverberations today. Now, moving forward, by this point, the election of 1868 was fast approaching. The Republicans nominated U.S. Grant, and with the help of 500,000 newly registered voters, Grant won. To combat this, Southerners tried to do away with freedmen voting. Grant pushed hard and got the 15th Amendment, which guaranteed the right to vote to all men, regardless of their race or previous condition of servitude. Believe it or not, with all these advancements, about 20% of office holders in the new Southern governments were black. There were even 20 African Americans in the House of Representatives and 2 in the Senate. But unfortunately, this was not going to last. As African Americans were making progress, Southern whites were still fighting. When legal means didn't work, they turned to violence. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan were started to scare black voters and the office holders. The Enforcement Acts were passed to combat the violence, and President Grant sent soldiers to keep the peace. At this point, we were about 7 years into Reconstruction, and Northerners were growing tired and losing interest. This can be seen with the Amnesty Act of 1872. This allowed forgiveness to former Confederates and allowed them to vote again. This caused disastrous results to the progress already made as Democrats gained back all but 3 of the southern states. And as the election of 1876 approached, this would be pivotal. It was the Republican Hayes versus the Democrat Tilden. Samuel Tilden actually won the popular vote, but only 184 of the 185 electoral votes needed to win the election. Rutherford B. Hayes, on the other hand, won 165 electoral votes, but there were still 20 being disputed. The House of Representatives, let me remind you, which was run by the Republicans, they formed an election committee, and of course they gave all 20 votes to Hayes. The Democrats protested, and they threatened to block the decision, and with inauguration coming up soon, they had to work out some sort of deal. So the Compromise of 1877 came about. Democrats conceded the election with the promise that Hayes would remove the military from the South. He did. This is considered the end of Reconstruction, but it's important to talk about how we moved backwards in the years immediately after. As public funding ran out, schools closed and free education went away for about half of the black children living in the South. Voting rights were also being stripped away with poll taxes, the grandfather clause, and literacy test. These skirted the 15th Amendment by applying to both races, but were clearly targeting African Americans. Redrawing the color line led to the Jim Crow era. Named for a minstrel character, these laws furthered segregation in the United States. An example of this is the Supreme Court case of Plessy v. Ferguson. In Louisiana, the law stated that there would be a train car for whites and a train car for people of color. To qualify as non-white, you only needed to be 1/8 black. Homer Plessy was just that, and he was as fair-skinned as me. But when he announced that he was 1/8 black, they had him arrested for riding in the wrong car, and his case made it all the way to the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, this is one of those cases that the court got wrong. And they declared that segregation was legal as long as it was separate, but equal. Inherently, you can't be equal if you are separate, and this doctrine spread to all aspects of Southern life, especially in schools. It was not until Brown v. Board of Education that it was struck down. This backslide of Southern life forced thousands of African Americans to leave the South. They were forced out by the racism and poverty, but also drawn by new opportunities in the North. Now, I think that about sums up Reconstruction. What do you think? Leave a comment below if you have any other questions I can help you with. While you're there, go ahead and hit that like button for me. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on your alerts so you can keep up with these history videos. Between your teachers and these videos, I know you're going to rock your class. Now, if you want to find out more, check out some of our other videos by clicking on the side over here. We have civics as well as more U.S. history videos. You're going to love them, so check them out. For Virtual History 360, I'm Mr. Wade. Thank you.